Hey, everybody, it's Tommy Canelli, and welcome to Before the Lights podcast, the show that tells you how they made their mark. He's an author, an actor who played Batman's sidekick, Robin. He's the last surviving main cast member of the TV series, which aired from 1966 to 1968, in which 3 seasons and 120 episodes were aired. This Caped Crusader has started Gentle Giants Rescue and Adoptions Incorporated, which rescues giant breed dogs and sells pet food that is veterinarian tested and recommended. Please welcome to the show, Burt Ward. Burt, welcome to Before the Lights.
Hello, citizen.
It is great to have you on the show.
Well, it's great to be here. Thank you.
One of the ways this show is supported is by its members, the BTL members group, that is. And to join that group, go to beforethelightspod.com/support and click on the BTL crew membership. We'd like to give a special shout out to Mansoor Mabai, the newest BTL crew member. Mansoor, thank you for your support. And for all the other BTL crew members, your support is greatly appreciated. Join the group and get ready for the upcoming Zoom calls. Also, get your name on a future show and hear the monthly Insight Show. Your father was the owner of a traveling ice show called Rhapsody on Ice, and at age 2, you were listed as a professional ice skater.
Yeah, well, the world's youngest professional ice skater. I skated in my father's show. And it's funny, obviously, when you're really young, it's hard to remember much, but I do remember the bright lights and the tremendous sound of the crowd, because we had these big arenas. But when you're on the ice and the lights are on you, you can't see anybody out there, but you can hear them. And what happened is 2 of his top skaters would come out, and I would be introduced, and they would skate around the ring or the arena there with me, like one holding each hand. And everybody thought, that's nice. 2-year-old doing that. And then they would let me go, and I would skate by myself, and people would go nuts. I mean, my skates were only 8 inches long, and that's the entire length of the blade, not the shoe. Okay, the shoe was a little tiny, but the blade was 8 inches long altogether. And so that was you have to understand, my father believed in an early work ethic. So he thought at 2 years of age, he should have me out there working.
Do you know about what age when they first put you on skates?
I guess it was about a year and a half, something like that, because that's when they were, and I do remember it. And I have the little skates. I have these little skates.
You do?
Believe it. Absolutely. They're tiny. I mean, the shoe is only like this, and the skate is like about that. And it was, and I have photos, and it was written up in a predecessor to, Believe It or Not, Ripley's Believe It or Not was called Strange as It Seems. And this one came out syndicated in newspapers in 1947. And it was really, it was quite something. It was all across the country syndicated. And it was the beginning of my career.
How did you get the nickname Sparky?
High energy. And then my mother felt like that I was like a sparkler, on July 4th type of thing. And that's why she gave me that nickname. And I will tell you this, let me just tell you how it paid off in life. When I went, and it was a whole big deal, even getting an opportunity to try out for the part of Robin, which, by the way, when I tried out, I had no idea. The agents that I had didn't even tell me what it was for. I don't think they knew what it was for. But the thing that was the reason why I want to tell you about this is because as it turned out, there were 1,100 young people interviewed for this one role over a 2-year period. 1,100. And when I was selected to play the role, the producer said to me, "Would you like to know why we picked you out of 1,100 people that we interviewed?" And I said, "Yes, sir, I'd like to know." And he said, and this is William Dozier, the executive producer, he said, forgetting show business, if there really was a Robin, I mean, like the real thing, we think that you personally would be it. So we don't want you to try to take on some character, comic book character. We believe that what you are is exactly what Robin would be like. So the only thing we would say to you is be enthusiastic and be yourself. Well, that's not hard to do, right?
Right.
For me, at least. So that's what I did for 120 episodes. And you might find it interesting that with all the different directors, I think we had, I don't know, probably 30 or 40 different directors in the course of the 3.5 years of shooting the primetime series, that not one time from one director was I ever told how to say a line. I mean, which is incredibly rare. Most of the time, directors say, well, can you say it with this more feeling, or could you do this? But no, I was left alone. And so was Adam. And we had this amazing chemistry. I don't know how to describe it. It's just that things clicked. And no matter what he said, I counterpointed it. I mean, if he talks slow and grand, I talk fast. I mean, whatever it was. And, all the great comic duos in history, if you look at them, there was great contrast, Abbott and Costello, Laurel and Hardy, Johnny Carson, Ed McMahon. I mean, great contrast. And it is that contrast that provided such interest to people. So it really, for my entire career, I've been very athletic. I'm a black belt in karate. In 2015, 7 years ago, I was inducted into the International Karate and Kickboxing Hall of Fame. I was friends with Bruce Lee. He and I used to spar together. In fact, a piece of trivia for your listeners is that, of course, Bruce Lee became the most famous cinematic martial artist in history, and probably nobody ever equaled him. But his piece of trivia for your listeners is that his first filmed fighting scene that was on film was fighting me on Batman. And that was, back in 1967. But he and I were friends. We used to actually train together, and he was an amazing person. So that gives you an idea. My whole life of athletics and sports and things like that.
Okay. So before we get into Batman, I want to back up a little bit. As you said, you're an athlete. You in high school, you excelled in football, track, wrestling. You remember the chess club, and you practiced Taekwondo. Was there any aspirations, Burt, of any of those sports to go play them at the collegiate level?
No. And the reason why is that I was only in university for 2.5 years when I got the role of Robin. And I will tell you, at UCLA, the dean of the university at the time I left the university to do the role was very upset with me. She said because I had placed in the top 2% in the college level of science and math that I should have been a nuclear physicist. So I actually liked playing the role of Robin better than being a nuclear physicist.
Is it true before you went to UCLA, you went to UCSB? Were you a DJ at the college radio station KCSB?
Yes, I was. And, I'll tell you something. That was like, I went to Beverly High School as when I was in high school, but they used to call UCSB Beverly by the Sea because it was just like in Goleta there in South Santa Barbara. It is just so beautiful. And, where can you take your classes? And after classes, you ditch your books, you go out and lay out on the beach and swim and surf or do whatever you want to do. It was a challenge when you have something that is that luring, right? To keep up your studies when you have something that is just so accessible. But it was good, and I loved it. And I came back to UCLA, and I loved UCLA. And it was funny. Here, I never graduated from UCLA, and yet my first year of doing the series, I was voted alumni king at UCLA, and I got to preside at the very famous UCLA, USC, the two competing universities there in Southern California, very famous, both of them, very tremendous universities. And they had their annual football game, and they drove the Batmobile all around. And I mean, this is at the Coliseum in Los Angeles, holds 100,000 people. So that was a great honor, but it was kind of funny because I hadn't even graduated, and voted alumni king.
You've been tabbed the world's fastest reader, speed reader, 30,000 words per minute with a 90% retention, which is mind-blowing to me. And listeners, to put this into perspective, the average person reads 240 words a minute with a 40% retention. Where did this accelerated reading come from?
Oh, years of study. I started studying when I was in high school, all 4 years of high school, and then and I had a terrific Dr. William Sparks, J.E. Sparks. He was a phenomenal teacher. He was like throughout the Beverly Hills schools and University of Southern California at Los Angeles. Very, and he had his own television show called Read Right, R-I-G-H-T. And I tell you, it was a tremendous thing. I mean, but I studied all the time, and it wasn't something like fun reading. You have to, it's all about, who, what, why, when, and where. I mean, it's work to do this. And the only way you can do that kind of volume is to do what they call space reading and indented reading, where when I would look at a page, initially when I started, I would look at the line above and the line below. In other words, look at the space between the lines, and you have to train your eyes to see that line above and the line below simultaneously. Over time, you can build it up where you can see a paragraph. And when you really get to the level where I was, I could at a glance look at a page and get that essence out of that page, the entire page. And it's the equivalent of reading the entire play of Macbeth in 1 minute. Oh. When I was at UCLA, I read War and Peace, which was 1,442 pages. I read it in 45 minutes and got an A essay final at UCLA. So it's very hard on you. I mean, it's not relaxed reading. But on the other hand, because of that, if I do read something in a relaxed way, I'm still like about 10 times faster than the average reader. And it'll help me on my remembering my lines on Batman. Mm-hmm. It was kind of funny because Adam and I were such dear friends. And because of that costume and just so many things going on, it's hard to remember your lines. So they had a teleprompter for Adam, and I just memorized my lines. I could look at him in about 20 seconds, and I never forget all the times Adam said to me, "Stop. Make a few mistakes. It's making me look bad, Burt." Because I wouldn't make, and I was known at getting everything right on the first take. And it just was, directors were like, "Oh my God, well, I can't do better than this. Move on to the next shot." And so that was, it really helped. In other words, in the acting, to be able to retain that much information and have it accessible, and just not just to know it, to be able to say it at the speed. Remember, my character spoke very quickly, mm-hmm. And I had so many tongue twisters on Batman. I had one where I had a line is, "Haven't you some anti-ballistic bat flax in your utility belt, Batman?" I mean, you try to say that. I mean, that is really tough. But they gave me all these wild and crazy lines, and I did well with them. But I loved Adam, and he and I worked so well together. Terrific relationship.
Burt, you had said that there was 1,100 that tried out, and you didn't even know what it was for, the part. But doing some research, I found out that you were taken into a room. They told you to take your pants off. 2 guys helped pull on some leotards. What were you thinking that this was about?
Well, here, that's basically correct. What happened is that I was helping my father sell real estate on the weekends, and I became the youngest person in California to get a real estate license at 3 months after I turned age 18, which is the minimum in the law. And I was like sitting on what they call sitting on houses, where on weekends, people would go look at houses, and, they'd have somebody there, and I would be there at the house. And then one of the people that came was a famous producer. And I just asked him, I said, "Would you be willing to watch a scene that I could do for you?" And he said, "Oh, okay." He was there to look at a house to buy. He wasn't there to look at a scene for me to do, but he was so nice about it. And I did the scene. He said, "You're really pretty good at this. How about I send you to an agent?" So he sent me to an agent who said to me, "I can't get work for any of the actors that I'm already trying to get work for. I would never take a new person. And only because this producer asked me to do it, I'm forced to do it. Don't expect to work for a year. And if you do, you might get one sentence." I mean, so that, wow, that's pretty rough. And then it was a couple of weeks after that I got a call from someone in his office that said, we don't know. It came across the boards there that there's something going on at Fox. We got an appointment for you tomorrow at 4:30. Drive over, they'll give you a parking pass and go see the casting director. And that's what I did. And then I went to see the casting director, and he said, he asked me 1 or 2 questions. That's all. And said, "Would you like to meet the executive producer?" I said, sure. I figured everybody got to meet the executive producer. Well, no, that's not true, but I didn't know that. And so I was sent to another bungalow, and I met Mr. Dozier. And maybe because I had never tried out for a role, I didn't feel like, I have to be so afraid. And because so many actors have been turned down for so many things. I mean, they're poor. I mean, a lot of them are pretty in bad shape emotionally. They're like destroyed before they go in for the interview. But me, no, I'd never been on an interview. So I just walked right in and said, hello, sir. And he's like, whoa, it took him back. And he looked at me, like, wow, I mean, this guy is like really intense. And he said, well, you're kind of big for the part. I said, oh, but sir, I promise you, I won't grow anymore. And he laughed. I mean, how can you keep from growing? And he said, would you like to do a screen test? I said, sure. I mean, didn't everybody get to do a screen test? Well, no, but I didn't know that. And it was at that screen test that I did some martial arts, broke a board with my hand, and did some lines with Adam, in which, by the way, I was handed a sheet of paper that just said paragraphs with Bruce and Dick, not Bruce Wayne or Dick Grayson, just Bruce and Dick. And on top of that, I'd never even read a Batman comic book, because where I grew up, they didn't have Batman comic books. So, and nothing was said about Batman or cartoon character, nothing, none of that. So it was after that I did that regular scene as, in the civilian clothes, that I was said, well, goodbye, everybody, and nice meeting you. And they said, no, wait a minute. We have one more thing for you to do. I said, oh, okay. They said, we want you to walk all the way over to the other end of that soundstage. And let me tell you something, they are gigantic. You have no idea how big that thing is, like a city block. He said, go all the way over there. We got a trailer over there. And there's 2 wardrobe men. They're going to help you get dressed. And I remember saying, well, no disrespect, sir, but I'm perfectly capable of dressing myself. He said, no, you don't know. You just go over there. So I went into the trailer, and sure enough, 2 wardrobe guys and a ton of stuff on this, it's like a couch or a bed. It was just gigantic. It's like 8 feet long. And I said, am I going to put some of this on? They said, no, you're going to put all of it on. And I'll tell you, it was the most uncomfortable thing in my entire life. I've never been so uncomfortable. Every single thing itched or hurt or pinched. It was just unbelievable. But being a positive person, as I hobbled towards the door in this god-awful costume, I remember turning to the 2 guys. I said, well, the good news here is that after another 15 or 20 minutes, I'll never have to wear this costume again. Famous last words, right? And then I saw Adam in his costume. I had no idea what it was. I didn't know anything about superheroes. I mean, I'd read Superman comic books, but this wasn't Superman. I thought maybe this is some Shakespearean period piece or something. I didn't know what it was. And then, it was later on, after 6 weeks of waiting, where the studio was calling every week saying, hey, what's your shoe size? Oh, 7.5. Well, what's your hat size? Well, I don't wear a hat. Well, go get your head measured. Well, where do I go to get my head measured? There are all these questions. And then I got a call from the agents. And they said, hey, come on in. We're going to sign contracts. I said, great. I'm going to be represented now. So I went to the agency. When I sat down, I looked at this 1.5 inch thick piece of a bunch of papers, and it said 20th Century Fox. I said, no, these aren't mine. I'm signing agency contracts. They said, no, you got the part. I said, I did? They said, you mean the studio didn't tell you? I said, no. They said, well, the studio didn't tell me. And it turns out that the agents hadn't told me. And when I went to the studio, they were surprised. And apparently 4 of the 6 weeks, I had the role and didn't even know about it. That shows you how crazy things are,
Yep. Burt, after landing the role, what was the moment to change your name from Burt Jervis to Burt Ward?
Well, it was Burt Gervis. Okay, and because of the mispronunciation, very easy to mispronounce, especially the studio actually said, Gervis, people are going to have a hard time, I think, remembering your name on the screen. Why don't you consider changing your name, or at least a stage name? And my mother's maiden name was Ward. And so I took my mother's maiden name, Ward, so I became Burt Ward, and it kind of worked out pretty good. Adam West is 4 letters first name, 4 letters last name, and mine same thing, 4 and 4. And Adam West and Burt Ward, but I did actually legally go to court and have it changed. And at the time I signed my agreement, I was just under 21 years of age. So I had to actually go to court to be approved and my parents had to help me get that so that I could do the role.
You said that you were an avid reader of comic books, especially Superman. Did any of that comic book reading help you portray the role of Robin?
Well, let me tell you what it did. I always fantasized being Superboy. I mean, you know, when you're a kid and you're like 4 or 5 years old, you know, you look in the mirror, you know, you're not 6'4". You know, I mean, right? I mean, you have to be a little bit realistic in your dreams and your daydreams. So I love the idea of being Superboy. And I had, when I was 3 years old, I remember my mother took a photo of me on a tricycle, you know, a little tricycle, where she had a towel, a bath towel wrapped around my neck held together with a clothespin. And I went around as though I was Superboy. And I will tell you one more thing. I actually believe that thoughts are things, because after school, I was kind of a loner growing up, even though I was very athletic and stuff. I still was kind of a shy kid, and I would come home and by myself for hours and hours and hours every single day after school. I would just take a ball and kick it against a wall and run and kick it, and I would kind of daydream while I was doing, you know, kicking this ball and being, you know, a bit athletic, and all I dreamed about was that. And I honestly believe that the intensity of my thought may have brought the opportunity to me, because other than that, you know, and it's so funny because all of the things that you see that the character that I did, you know, the hitting the fist together and all of the things I did, jumping instead of opening the door and getting the car, jumping over the door into the seat of the Batmobile, or jumping out. And in fact, I'll tell you, there's a quick thing that in the first episode that kind of gives you an idea of how I approached it. I did what I thought was right. I mean, in other words, I so easily could just daydream myself into the role. We had a scene in the first episode with Frank Gorshin, who played the Riddler, where the Batman and Robin drive up in the Batmobile outside a museum, and we're going to climb up the walls because we think the museum is being robbed by the Riddler, and so we want to, you know, go without him knowing about it, you know, catch him in the act of doing something bad. And, or, you know, like pull up with a Batmobile, they expected me to get out of the door, Batmobile. So what did we do? The director said, cut, you can't do that. We lit you coming out of the door. You know what I mean? You went out of frame. I said, okay. And they said, well, wait a minute. This is Robert Butler. He said, you know, actually, that was really so natural and so great. He says, all right, we're going to light for that. So it took 45 minutes for them to lay down track, put the camera on a dolly, and set up all the lights so that I redid that scene exactly the same way and jumping off. And of course, it's in the show. And it was that kind of thing that this director said, you know, he said, that is what makes you so natural. You are so into it that, you know, as long as we can keep you in frame, this is going to work out great.
How much was improvised on your part for lines, or did you just go strictly by script on what was there?
I went by the script, except there were the holies that not all the writers got the right feeling for them. In other words, when I said holy this or holy that, it wasn't just some random thing. It always was tied into the situation. We were in a spaghetti factory, okay? And I had a line, holy ravioli, Batman. You know, I mean, it was always something that there was some tie-in to the situation. And because the writers didn't always really get the right one, it didn't sound right, didn't work out good, that they gave me the flexibility to change it. Had to be approved by the director, of course, but nevertheless, so, you know, a number of them that I changed to, you know, or I came up with one where they didn't have one and said, oh, gee, that's great. Let's do that. And if you think about it, just even in everyday life, you know, you see people all the time say, holy this or this. I mean, what I did has really made a permanent impression as part of the vocabulary here in the U.S.
This is my story. No symptoms to being diagnosed with colon cancer, which led to 4 surgeries and a 50-50 survival rate. It then spread to my liver, in which only 3% are caught in time. Now, a 1% chance it ever comes back. And I'm on the road to inspiring everyone, because you have 3 choices: live, die, or fight. Bernie Siegel said, no matter what the statistics say, there's always a way. To book me, Tommy Canale, to speak to your event or group, go to TommyCanale.com. That's TommyCanale.com. And get ready to be inspired to inspire others, because you're one day away from changing your life. Click the link in the show notes. You had several injuries filming this series. There's a couple that I want to talk about. The first one is, can you tell the story where they were dangling you and they put meat above you for a Bengal tiger to get him to look up at you?
Well, not to look up at me, to jump up at me. See, the thing was, this is a Catwoman show, and the scene was that Robin was tied onto a plank over a cage of 3 live Bengal tigers. These were not trained animals. These were wild Bengal tigers. They were still, I guess maybe they're a little bit more domesticated than completely in the wild, because they were, from one of these places that have wild animals, but nobody got in there and personally handled them. You understand? They used sticks and stuff to direct them, and because these were wild animals. And what's interesting is that, as I found out later, that these tigers can jump up to 15 feet. I mean, literally jump up to 15 feet high. And I was only 12 feet above them, tied down with my arms at my sides, my head hanging over the end of the plank, right? And 10 feet above me is this giant steel cage with the cameraman and the director safely in their steel cage, 10 feet above me, right? And so when we go to do the scene, the tigers didn't look upright at first. And so the director said to the handlers, well, see what you can do to make them look up. You know what I mean? And so they tapped, on the top of the cage, where I was, and it was open below me. In other words, there was no protection. It was totally open. And so they tapped on it. The tigers looked up, but they didn't do anything. And so in the course of trying to get this scene to look good, finally they said, well, we want something that looks realistic. So they actually took meat and they hung it above my head. And when these cats jumped, I mean, they could easily they could have killed me easy. And it just wasn't a safe thing to do. No. I mean, I got to tell you, there's some really dangerous things at that time that happen that they don't do anymore, because people could get killed.
Right.
And that was one of them. So, and after the scene, I remember the director, when he got out of the steel cage that was 10 feet above me, came over and said, Burt, it was so realistic. The way you fought against those, the things, the ropes that held you was just so realistic. So what do you mean realistic? Of course. I mean, but they were coming up in my face with their claw. I'm fighting. I mean, I was frightened that I could have died.
That is crazy.
It was really serious. And they had things like that. They had another one where we've only filmed it one time, where with the back poles, people always would say, oh, you're in the study and you turn case opens and you run and you jump on the poles. How high was that? Well, that was only about 10 feet off the ground. I mean, we just slid out of view. But there was a real thing that we had to film, and we only did it once. It was the most stupid thing. I don't even know why I did it. It was so dangerous, no protection, where they set up at Batman and Robin's poles all the way from the floor of the soundstage right up near the top of the soundstage. The soundstage, I think, was 65 feet high, and this was like 50 or 55 feet high. And we had to go up those rickety stairs. You have to understand, they don't have wonderful, they have these old rickety stairs that you can see through as you're going up, and you're going higher and higher and higher. And they got up to a point where they had it, where Adam and I were had to jump onto the poles and slide down. there was no rope. There was no protection. There was nothing. If I didn't catch that pole right, I'd be dead. And they explained to us that as we slide down, there's going to be tremendous friction. So instead, and so with your gloves, through the gloves. So what you have to do is you kind of hold and then let go, and hold and let go, and hold and let go. And then with against like this side, you had to use the soles, but at an angle. So, and it literally burned through the sole of my shoes coming down. But between the two of the hands, holding and letting go, and, you know, you still slid down, but it wasn't at the speed that, you know, you could have gotten killed. But if I missed the pole, or Adam had missed the pole, we'd be dead. And we both did it. And I was like really uncomfortable just jumping to that pole. But I can remember some sliding down, you know, to turn. It was the real thing. It was and then listen, it was like a week later, they said to me, Burt, we need, you know, because you wear a little mask and because your stuntman doesn't look like you, he's got a big nose like Cyrano de Bergerac, and he doesn't look like you. We need you to do this shot. I said, okay, well, what's the shot? Well, Burt, we actually have to hang you over the top of a soundstage. I said, what? And they said, yes, but we got two of our strongest stuntmen. They're going to hold you, and you know what I mean? They're not going to drop you, but you have to be upside down over the top of the soundstage. I said, I feel really uncomfortable about this.
I would too.
It's in the show. We got to do this, but don't worry, we don't have to do it till after lunch. Okay. So as I sat there at lunch, because they have a thing where they bring out the lunch, catered the lunch, and I'm sitting there watching these two stuntmen eating greasy fried chicken, right, with their hands. Now, what do you think that would do to your hands holding greasy fried chicken? Like maybe might like slip, you know? What I did, I said, look, I'm not doing this way. You got to do it my way, or I'm not doing it at all. And what they did is they took one of these big ropes, like, you know, when a yacht comes in and they have these big ropes.
Yeah.
You know, they tie it at the harbor there. I mean, not like a cruise ship with big ropes, but, you know, probably an inch thick rope. And I tied it around my ankle. And because I didn't have to be every bit off, but just mostly off. And then I made them, and I watched it tie it around the thing, and I checked it a couple of times. So when they hung me over there, my one ankle was not over the end of the thing because it was holding on to but God, that was so scary. I mean, that was just, you just can't believe. I mean, and it looks, when you're up at the top of a soundstage, it looks like you're circling the earth in a satellite or something. You're way up in the air. It was very scary. I mean, those are the kinds of things that I did, and sometimes really had to go to the hospital.
And listeners, Burt did all this for $350 a week, which when you hear all these stories, it's like, you'd have to pay me a whole lot more to do it. But at that time, $350 was probably a pretty good payday.
Not really. That was minimum wage for a job acting. But the next year is when I really got the big increase from $350 a week to $450 a week. And then, of course, the final year is when I made the killing at $600 a week, but only half the number of shows. No, Adam was paid 10 times that. And I mean, you hear about shows like Friends where they get $1 million an episode, and I'm getting $350 a week and wearing that costume and in real danger. I mean, in real serious. I mean, I can't tell you how many things where I had broken noses, second-degree burns from explosions, inhalation of penguin gas. I mean, there's just so much that could go wrong. And sometimes I got to know the one of the doctors at the emergency hospital, and he would often tell me, he says, you know, you might consider a different kind of business. You know, you're taking some pretty hard hits here.
Burt, why was the show cut? Because it was immensely popular at the time.
As I understood it, it was a big reason was the loss of every week. We had a huge crew. You have to understand all these stunts and all these, these things, these cliffhangers where they had complicated, giant birthday cakes with quicksand and all kinds of things to get them to work. So instead of a crew of about 30 people, as I recall it, they had a crew like as many as 80 people. And the show was, even as popular as it was, still the cost of making that was like $300,000 a week that they were losing. And that's a lot of money. And in those days, there was a thing that I had heard about, I had never heard before, called feather bedding. And that's when the unions were so strong that for every person on the crew that was working, the union required the studio to have on immediate notice and pay them the same rate. In other words, so if you had a person, a gaffer, who was moving the lights, okay, in case he got sick or hurt, there had to be another gaffer available close by to take his spot. And so it was so expensive to make. And they were losing in 1966, $300,000 a week is like probably $5 million a week in today's money. So, and after 120 episodes of losing that kind of money, it got to a point where the studio, I mean, remember, it's called show business, not just show, it's show business. So they obviously came to the conclusion that they'd made enough show to rerun our shows in perpetuity forever, where it didn't, they didn't get as much per episode, but they didn't have any cost with it. So it became a business decision, and that's why Batman was canceled.
In 1985, you worked with DC Comics on the Batman series. What was that like for you as an avid reader of comics as a kid to now working with them on the Batman series?
Well, I mean, I've actually worked with DC Comics, in fact, recently in the last year and a half with it, because now they have a streaming service, and they brought me in to introduce all the different shows they have on streaming service. Also with DC, they have this wonderful, amazing coffee table book called 80 Years of the Boy Wonder that they asked me to write the kind of like an introduction to it. It was 6 pages long, and they put it in the beautiful, I mean, just the most gorgeous printed book you can imagine. So I've worked with them, and I remember when DC Comics was owned by a company called National Periodicals, which was later purchased by Warner Brothers. I mean, I go all the way back to Jay Emmett, who was this is like the beginning of the whole comic book thing that became owned by a studio. So, I've always had a great relationship with. I have a wonderful relationship with them now. They give me the rights to put my Robin image on our Gentle Giants dog food bags. That's a fabulous opportunity and right to be able to use my image as Robin and all the Batman and copyright logos and stuff on my bags. So I've just had a great working relationship with them. And of course, I've also done in the last probably 4 or 5 years, 2 that I provided the voice for as Robin. And this is just before Adam West passed. He provided the voice of Batman for the 2 full-length features. And they were, in fact, one of them was voted the best animated feature to come out that year. So I've just had a great relationship with them, and they're it's a wonderful studio. And I mean, look with all the fantastic things that they're doing now, and the superheroes that they have, the whole DC line of superheroes.
Where is, or do you know where the original costume is and what it's valued at?
Well, I had 6 costumes at all times because of the fight scenes, getting them torn. So, and then I had to use, and I actually made one myself at the time, just for close-ups, because the just from the fight scenes, the collar on a cape kept getting frayed and stuff like that. So and they were always saying, "Oh, well, let's put some tape on this or do this," and so I just said, "No, I want it to look great." So I went out and paid to have my own costume made that I used in the show for close-ups, and the studio didn't care, but that's why it always looks so good. But I had 6 costumes, and most of them were destroyed by the time the show was over. My own one that I made, I believe, is in a museum in Chicago.
Was there any backlash from any organizations on the show or the outfit? Because I know in 66 it was the free love decade, but I got to think that some people looked at that costume and said, wait a minute, I don't know about this.
Yeah, that's true. There was a time. Well, you have to understand, Batman was the #1 and #2 show in the entire world. When we aired opening night, January 12th, 1966, there was a 55 share. All of North America, all the TVs that were on in North America, that 55% were watching Batman on ABC, and the other 45% of the televisions on were watching, this is not all of North America, that's not just the US, but Mexico and Canada. They were watching local programming, regional programming, maybe some watching CBS, NBC, but we had, and even Super Bowl does not get that kind of a share, a 55 share. So it was gigantic. I mean, and everybody. And so one of the groups that got involved wanted to get involved was called the Catholic Legion of Decency. And they thought that Robin's costume was too tight fitting in the area of the shorts, and there was an unnatural bulge that after all, I tell people, man was not built for tights, right?
This is true.
And it became a bit of a problem on the set and the network and this, and all of this. And I mean, there was some, crazy stuff that went on with trying to get me to wear different things under my tights to, satisfy the Catholic Legion of Decency. And none of them really worked. So, but it was ultimately resolved when the studio found a doctor that gave me pills that would shrink you up there for a few hours at a time. And after 3 days of taking the pills, I said, this could mess me up. I might never be able to have children. So I stopped taking the pills and just used my cape to cover.
January 9th, 2020, you get your star on the Hollywood Walk of Fame.
Right. That was a great honor.
I'm sure it's a great honor. My question is, did you feel like it was long overdue, that it should have been done a lot sooner?
Well, it took 55 years. And I tell people, I'm a patient person. 55 years seems like a little long to wait, don't you think?
Yes.
But not every actor gets that. Oh, no, it's not just the popularity of your programming of whatever you've done. It's also they want people in Hollywood that have given back, that do charitable work. And my gosh, with my wife and I operating the largest giant breed dog rescue in the world and saving more than 15,500 dogs from death, many of them on the day they were going to be put to death, and all of which we did it took no money. There was no salary involved. It's like, they say horse racing is a rich man's sport because the cost, unless you have the Kentucky Derby winner, it's just an expensive sport to be involved with it. And rescuing animals was very expensive. We were spending more than $100,000 a year just in vet bills. And we feed here at our home, where we have at all times about 50 dogs in our house, by the way. We feed 600 pounds of food of our Gentle Giants dog food every single day. We feed 600. And that's, if you give you a perspective on a big 30-pound bag of dog food, that's 20 bags a day. And can you only imagine, what does it take to lift, carry, pour, and clean up from 20 bags a day? Okay. 7 days a week for 28 years. Okay. That's a lot of work. And we do have some help, but it's still, my wife, Tracy, personally handles every one of the dogs. And one of the things that we're very proud of, I want to share with you, is that when we started rescuing these giant breed dogs, they traditionally only live very short lifetimes. Mastiffs and Irish Wolfhounds live 6 to 8 years. That's their normal lifespan. Great Danes live 7 to 9 years. And when we would lose a dog, it so disturbed us. I mean, my wife and I would literally cry. And we vowed, if there was a way, that we'd try to help these animals live longer. Because, I mean, just a sweet, wonderful animal, why should it only live 6 to 8 or 9 years? So we first devised a feeding and care program, which all of your listeners or viewers should be feeding their dogs the way we feed them. It actually can add 5 to 8 years to the dog's life just by the way you feed them. But we also created a food for our dogs. You have to understand, when you live with 50 dogs 24 hours a day, 7 days a week, and a cumulative amount of 15,500 dogs, you're so occupied in your own little world here of animals that you don't really kind of think outside of the box, so to speak. So we created a food. We spent like $4 million to create the finest food in the world. And we have dogs living up to 27 and a half years. And one of the things that happened was because we would adopt, you have to adopt them in order to take new ones because we're limited as to how many we could have. But when we would adopt the dogs and people would come to adopt them and they would see 18-year-old Great Danes, which, I mean, already twice the normal lifespan, almost 2.5 times the normal lifespan. And then they would adopt the dog from us. What happened was they started saying, well, what do we do about food for our dog? I said, oh, you can feed whatever you want. And they said, no. We want what you have there. I mean, you've got these dogs living 18, 19 years. And that was at the time, now up to 27 with the new technology we have. And they said, otherwise, we're not going to adopt a dog. Well, you have to understand, we never intended to sell this. We just couldn't stand to see our dogs dying so young. So all of a sudden, now we're scrambling to comply with labeling laws because we just had the food made in plain white bags, which finally we did all of the stuff. And now we're qualified in every state in the United States to sell it. But the point is that we only were doing this because we couldn't stand to see dogs dying so young. And now our food is all over the United States. It's in Target stores. It's online with all the major online, Petco, PetSmart.com, Chewy.com. And in Canada, we're in all the Walmarts. And hundreds of thousands of people are feeding Gentle Giants, which is the name of our food, to their dogs. And I'm getting amazing letters. I got an email from a man, don't even know him, who wrote to me and said, Burt, I want to thank you. I've been feeding your food to my German Shepherd for the last 15 years. He never had a sick day in his life. He just died and he was 23 years old. A German Shepherd at 23 with never illness in his whole life. Nobody else has been able to do this. And in fact, there's a TV show called Inside Edition that came out to our house when they heard about our dog, Tara, a Russian wolfhound, only supposed to live 7 to 9 years. She was 25 years old when they came out, and we have all the paperwork, we have all the medical records, we prove it 100%. But the point was, they spent an entire day filming this dog, and the segment that aired nationally was titled, "Could this be the oldest living pooch in the world?" And after they did the segment, she was 25 and a half. She lived to 27 and a half years. 2 years more, and of an average lifespan of 7 to 9 years, that was 4 times her normal lifespan. So we are thrilled about this, and now we even have a Gentle Giants cat food. We have 2 of our cats. We lost 2 of them last year. One was 31 years old. The other was 32 years old. Unheard of. Never sick day. Never had to take him to the vet other than to have a rabies shot. So we really are very thrilled at what we've been able, and very proud, and we take no salary from this. I got to tell you, we've never taken a dime, never will. This is all about loving animals and making it, in our case, our life's work to save animals. And, when we leave this planet, Tracy, my wife, and I really want to leave things in a better place than when we found them. And that has become our life's work. And so we're, in addition to rescuing dogs and having dog food and still doing my acting, we're now getting into production, and we're going to be producing our own television shows and our own movies, and everything with an uplifting, fun, everything the whole family can enjoy, great top of the line entertainment, but with a positive message in a world that is so torn by so much strife and anger, and we just want to make a better world for everybody.
I love that, Burt. I'm an animal person. I have 2 cats myself. I definitely got to check out the cat food. Listeners, go to the show notes. I'm going to put a link so you can get hooked up with the pet products, with the food, and to go to Gentle Giants website. In today's real estate market, you need to work with a real estate professional who you can trust. Amy Canale is a proud member of the Berkshire Hathaway Home Services Network in Nevada. She will provide the absolute finest service, dedication, and expertise possible. Whether you want to buy, sell, or rent, Amy can help make your home ownership dreams come true. To contact Amy, call 480-685-1217, go to her website, amycanale.com, or click the link in the show notes. BS 0146092. Burt, I want to say thank you so much for taking time out of spending time with your animals and helping animals live a whole long life and coming on my show. This has been fun.
Well, thank you for being a wonderful host and a wonderful interviewer and asking great probing questions. And I guess as I'd like to close by what we said on Batman. To the Batmobile, citizen.
And with that, listeners, go follow me on Instagram at Before the Lights Podcast. And if you'd like to support the show, go to the show notes and click on the link that says beforethelightspod.com/support. Thank you for listening to Before the Lights. I'm Tommy Canale. And until next time, everybody, I salute a chin chin.